What does it mean? The essence of understanding. I used to do a lot of terrible PowerPoint presentations and probably sat through even more. How often have you sat through a presentation where by slide 10 you couldn't remember what was on slide 1? I thought models were a way out, though it can actually be even worse. While you can see the model develop piece by piece so that you get a picture of the puzzle as it's developing and put together, it still has the same difficulty by the time you get to the 10th loop. Trying to remember what the first loop implied is often relatively difficult. So rather than, and with the advent of auto loop detection in Kubu, I found out that for me things were actually even worse, because with this model, which was developed by Fangos and Xiao, I found out that there were actually 9 loops that I didn't even know were there. And if you don't know they're there, how do you evaluate whether or not they actually contribute? So the question was, how do I get out of this predicament of actually making things worse? Now, I have always, once I added the other loops into the model, it got even worse, because now there's 22 of them, and by the time you walk through the sequence, I can't imagine anybody that wouldn't be confused. I've always been a great fan of frequently recurring structures, which some people call archetypes, because each one of them, when you identify and have one, you don't want to have it because they're all negative. A frequently recurring structure has a very well-defined structure with a characteristic pattern of behavior and a well-defined strategy for how to deal with it. And what I realized over time was that in the midst of one of these messes, there is typically one or a small number of archetypes which are primarily responsible for the behavior of the structure. So if you take this structure with 22 loops in it, what it seems to boil down to is you have a bunch of pieces that are about accommodating births, you have a bunch of pieces about avoiding births, and a bunch of pieces about avoiding pregnancy. And the thing is that these two pieces, this piece and part of this piece, connect together to give you another vicious reinforcing structure that actually promotes unwanted pregnancy that you don't want. That's a situation that you don't want to improve upon. And these two go together, and it's actually a shifting the burden structure. Whereas part of this loop connects to part of this loop, and you end up with another vicious reinforcing structure to promote unwanted pregnancy, which forms another shifting the burden structure, which actually promotes unwanted pregnancy. So what happens is that this mess is actually boils down to two shifting the burden structures mushed together, and the insight that unfolded at the same time was this relationship and this relationship are not actually on that model. And to put them on the model would be probably dozens of additional connections, because the accommodate births piece is actually multiple loops, so that all of these loops are the accommodate births piece, and all of these loops are the actual avoid births pieces, and these pieces are the avoid pregnancy detail. Now, while I have done this on numerous instances in terms of taking a model that is hopelessly beyond comprehension and turned it into something of this nature, I still don't know how I get from one to the other. It's sort of, you sit there and you ponder the model for a long time, and all of a sudden it becomes obvious, or apparently obvious, that there's essentially an archetype or a frequently recurring structure in the midst of it someplace that just screams out to say this is what it's actually doing, and you could present this to someone. It's 5 loops, and 2 higher order loops structures. I think it's far easier to present this to someone than it is to try and get them to understand this all at once. Now, if I figure out how to get from one to the other in a reliable fashion, I'll let you know. And if you have the answer, I'd really like to know. So, hope you found this of some interest, and I'll see you in another video soon. Oh, and all the links to these models are in the notes section of the video. Bye.